Thank you so much for joining us today for our Women's Rights or Human Rights Zoom event, talk and tour. We are really excited to be here with our guest curator, Elizabeth Resnick, and the three panelists that are participants in the show, Anita Kunst, Alice Juling, and Parissa Tashakori. Thank you all three for being here today and joining us and Elizabeth for this wonderful event. I'd like to also introduce some members of my staff. Emily Ta is here today, and Emily was involved with the designing of the virtual exhibition that you'll see a little bit later. And Macario is also one of my staffers who was involved in designing all the marketing materials for this event. And also want to introduce Trinity Frere, who is one of our social media and promotion team member, as well as Venus Valderrama was also here, I believe, for a short period, and maybe she'll come back in a bit. And Molly O'Connor is also here, who is another one of my student workers who is an architecture major. All of these staffers are either visual communication design majors or architecture majors. And so very apropos to be working with graphic design, such a fundamentally important graphic design exhibition, and also working with the architectural components for it to design a virtual exhibition. So I just want to thank them for all of their support over the last few months in helping organize this and helping me and supporting me throughout curatorial processes that we do on a regular basis with our exhibit programming and our events. I want to jump in here and go ahead and introduce Elizabeth Resnick, our guest curator, and allow her to go ahead and present her experience with doing this, organizing this exhibition, which we are super excited to have here at Cal Poly Pomona at the Kellogg Art Gallery. You know, loving it isn't even a fair representation, but so many people have been touched and affected by it as well, because it is a very poignant topic. And there are a lot of very important visual communication representation of a global conversation, really visual conversation with so many of these works. So I would like to introduce Elizabeth. Please take control of the screen.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will begin by sharing. So it is my honor to be here with you today to talk about some of the issues that are presented in the Women's Rights or Human Rights exhibition. But first, I do have to thank Michele Cairella Fillmore, who has been speaking and introducing, gallery curator of the W. Keith and Janet Kellogg University Gallery, for her foresight in recognizing the value and power of this exhibition, and for organizing and curating both the physical and the virtual installation at Cal Poly Pomona. Michele and her really amazing team have done a wonderful job in bringing this exhibition to campus and for organizing the Zoom event. So thank you, Michele. Women's struggle to gain acceptance, recognition, and equal rights has been a very long process. My traveling poster exhibition, and the full title is Women's Rights or Human Rights, International Posters for Gender-Based Inequality, Violence, and Discrimination, seeks to shine a spotlight on these issues. In many countries, women's rights simply do not exist. Even in first world countries like the US, women are still discriminated against in the workplace, in education, in equal pay for equal work, in healthcare coverage, and family leave policies. Truth be told, I borrowed the title Women's Rights or Human Rights from a speech given by Hillary Rodham Clinton at the United Nations Fourth World Congress on Women, which was held in Beijing, China on September 5th, 1995. In her speech, Mrs. Clinton sought to closely link the notion of women's rights with that of human rights. She suggested that, and I quote, if the term women's rights were to be interchangeable with the term human rights, the world community would be a better place because human rights affect the women who raise the world's children, care for the elderly, run companies, work in hospitals, fight for better education and better health care. Gender inequities remain deeply entrenched in every society. In many cultures, women have very little control over their bodies. Female sexuality is largely controlled and defined by men in patriarchal societies. Sexual violence is often rooted in male entitlement ideologies, and these systems grant women very few legitimate options to refuse sexual advances. This male entitlement can take different forms depending on the culture. Human rights and women's rights are violated every day as rape and brutality have become armed conflict strategies. Women and children make up a large majority of the world's refugees. And when excluded from the political process, women become even more defenseless against abuse. The exhibition features posters created by both men and women to acknowledge the vital role women play locally, nationally, and internationally in protecting and promoting human rights. These posters challenge religious and cultural norms, patriarchal attitudes that subordinate, stigmatize, or restrict women from achieving their fullest potential. They argue for eliminating discrimination against women and girls by empowering them to achieve the quality that fosters human dignity. I will examine several of the issues explored in this exhibition through 5 selected poster series. First, we'll start with gender-based inequality. The male guardianship system is part of Saudi Arabia's adherence to a rigid interpretation of the Quran. It remains the most significant impediment to women's rights in the kingdom, despite the limited reforms over the last decade. Regardless of economic or social class, every Saudi woman is adversely affected by the guardianship policies. Her life is controlled by a man from birth until death. Every Saudi woman has a male guardian, usually her father or her husband, her brother or her son, and they have the power to make decisions on her behalf, effectively rendering her as a legal minor. Adult women must obtain permission from a male guardian to travel, marry, or leave prison. Women regularly face difficulty in conducting a range of transactions without a male relative, from renting an apartment to filing legal claims. The impact of these restrictive policies can vary widely, and she is completely dependent on the goodwill of her male guardian. Saudi Arabia has made some reforms to ease restrictions on women over the last 10 years. Notable examples include allowing women to participate in the country's limited political space, actively encouraging women to enter the labor market, and allowing a woman to drive. They can now also attend movies and sporting events alongside men. While the reforms are a step in the right direction, they remain partial and incomplete, and as the male guardianship system remains in place, impeding and in some cases nullifying the success of these reforms. The next 2 poster series reflect violence against women. Abused Goddesses is the title of an arresting and powerful advertising campaign created by an advertising agency in Mumbai, India. The ads portray 3 Indian goddesses in their traditional poses, adorned in silks, jewels, and crowns. The agency's creative team physically recreated these scenes, inspired by popular calendar hand-painted images of Indian goddesses. Makeup was applied to the live models to add cuts and bruises to their beautiful faces, a stark reminder of the violence against women that plagues India, a predominantly Hindu nation. The awareness campaign was commissioned by Save the Children India for its Save Our Sisters initiative, which was organized to prevent the sex trafficking of young girls and women. Having a closer look at these images. The caption underneath the picture reads, and I quote, "Pray that we never see this day. Today, more than 68% of women in India are victims of domestic violence. Tomorrow, it seems like no woman shall be spared, not even the ones we pray to," end quote. Adjacent to this message is a telephone number to report cases of domestic abuse. The campaign effectively captures India's most dangerous contradiction and hypocrisy, that of revering women in religion and mythology, while the nation remains incredibly unsafe for its female citizens. Over 100 million, predominantly women and girls, are said to be involved in sex trafficking. The mission of the campaign was to create a dialogue, and it certainly succeeded. When the campaign went viral, many people found the imagery both meaningful and powerful. Media coverage inevitably led to the broad range of viewpoints. While some people praised the impact of the images, others felt uncomfortable with the stereotype of women as goddesses to represent domestic violence survivors. And these survivors cut across religious lines, caste, and class in India. Well, some people believe the campaign overall premise was to expose social hypocrisy and double standards within Hinduism. Others thought it came at the expense of the religion's integrity. Both sides of the argument denounced domestic violence. The main objective toward the Save Our Sisters platform is that by portraying goddesses as domestic abuse victims, they are elevating women to an unnecessary ideal that they cannot achieve, setting up the perception that a woman must behave like a goddess to be respected. And when they fail to meet these standards, the women are punished. The conflict lies in the interpretation of how the goddesses are depicted and the assumption of their role in society. But domestic violence is not limited or confined to a specific religion. Instead, domestic violence is a non-religious crime prevalent throughout the world, regardless of ethnicity, gender, age, region, or religion. The campaign does not suggest any particular or tangible course of action to bring about change. The campaign's aim seems to be more to make people aware that such violence does happen, rather than to help or suggest ways to curb it. Time will tell how instrumental this campaign was in implementing the domestic violence laws India already has in place. Since the early 1990s, hundreds of cases of violent deaths of women and girls have been reported in Juarez City, Mexico, a border city across the Rio Grande from El Paso, Texas. Many of the victims are girls and young women, ages 10 to 22, who came to Juarez to work in the foreign-owned factories. Almost all were slender, had dark skin, and long dark hair. All of them were poor, and most were assaulted on their way home from work. The brutality of these murders is stunning. Women have been raped, slashed, strangled, crushed, maimed, dismembered, and mutilated. Crimes of such intense hatred that they destroy a woman's personhood and simply erase their existence. In Mexico, sociocultural practices such as machismo, which is characterized by male power and aggression, are widespread. Machismo, motivated by misogyny and sexism, promotes men's superiority over women and triggers acts of extreme violence against women simply because they are women. After years of official apathy and police incompetence, towards solving and ending these brutal murders, mothers of the murdered daughters began to organize in the 1990s. Their efforts inspired many human rights activists and ordinary citizens to raise awareness about violence against women and the ongoing public insecurity. In the early 2000s, a concerned group of graphic designers from Mexico City invited their colleagues to express their outrage by designing posters with the slogan, "The women of Juarez demand justice." In celebration of International Women's Day on March 8th, 2003, these design activists staged an exhibition of 60 large format posters in a Mexico City subway station to educate citizens about the murders and to force authorities to become more involved. Displays and exhibits are often mounted in these large spaces in a city with over 20 million people and viewed by vast numbers of people who usually do not visit museums and galleries. The 3 posters included in the Women's Rights or Human Rights exhibition were created for this purpose. No one knows precisely how many women have been killed or kidnapped in Juarez, but gender-based killings continue. Crimes go undiscovered, unsolved, and unpunished. So much so that homicide that is based on gender has generated its own official classification in Mexico and in much of Latin America. It is called femicide. Femicide is not just the killing of victims who happen to be female. It is a systematic violation of human rights. Whether through domestic violence or sexual assault, the victims of femicide are killed because they are women. Gender violence is pervasive at the national level. In Mexico, more than half of all women have been victims of violence by men, either strangers or partners. Of Mexico's 46.5 million women over the age of 15, 66% have faced emotional, physical, sexual, or economic violence in their lives. Last year, on Sunday, March 8th, 2020, millions of women and men flooded the streets of Mexico City to protest the ongoing and unchecked violence against women. The next day, on Monday, March 9th, millions of women went on strike and refused to go to work in a protest titled #A Day Without Us. Local, state, and federal government officials joined in the various protests as well. These movements signal to authorities that not one more femicide will be tolerated, while activists have succeeded in putting violence against women on the public and political agendas. And the mothers of Juarez still await justice for their murdered daughters. The next 2 poster series reflect on the discrimination against women. Female genital mutilation, also known as female circumcision or cutting, is a term that encompasses all procedures involving partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injuries to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. Female genital mutilation is recognized internationally as a violation of the human rights of girls and women. It reflects deep-rooted inequality between the sexes and constitutes an extreme form of discrimination against women. This slide details 4 major types of female genital mutilation. The physical and emotional harm is indisputable, usually performed by an elderly family member, a birth attendant, or sometimes a healthcare worker. The healing process can take months, and often the wounds never completely heal. In addition to the psychological trauma suffered by girls old enough to remember this event, the female genital mutilation also causes urinary problems, infections, menstrual difficulties, pain during intercourse, childbirth complications, and in some cases, death. The World Health Organization estimates that in the 29 mostly African and Middle Eastern countries where the practice flourishes, more than 200 million girls and women alive today have undergone the procedure. Multiple agencies of the United Nations and Amnesty International are collaborating with the World Health Organization to lead the charge to end the practice as a part of a massive campaign to eliminate violence against girls and women. The practice itself is at the center of social, cultural, and religious norms. Every culture has its standards for acceptability and attractiveness. In cultures where women are considered property or inferior to men, female genital mutilation is a way to promote virginity, marital infidelity, because it makes sexual intercourse extremely painful. In these cultures, the procedure has become synonymous with purity, modesty, and beauty, and is supported by both men and women. In some circles, a woman who has not had this procedure is considered dirty and unmarriable. Since women do not have many options other than marriage in certain societies, their parents deem this procedure necessary to find husbands for their daughters. This poster series, created for Amnesty International by a Swedish advertising agency, illustrates the stitches and closures used in 3 of the 4 different types of female genital mutilation. Here, the rose is a metaphor for female genitalia, symbolizing the peak of youthfulness, sexual innocence, virginity, or purity. Creating an ad campaign to awareness on this subject was a unique challenge. Because of its intimate nature, using graphic images is not an option. Instead of pushing the boundaries on violent imagery or watering down the message with beautiful faces of poor girls, the creative team employed a powerful solution that, in my view, expresses the outrage without degrading the viewer or the victim. Even though the practice of infibulation is almost literally pictured here, these ads use strong symbolism and the power of imagination to make sure that we don't stay indifferent, and we should not. When an advertising agency creates a campaign for an NGO like Amnesty International, their job is not to sell you a commodity or an experience. They want to mobilize you by making you aware of a painful reality in the world that needs to change. The next one is called the Autocomplete Truth, the next series. Created by Nimak Ogilvy Dubai, the Autocomplete Truth is a very successful 2013 campaign for UN Women, the United Nations organization whose mission is to foster gender equality and women's empowerment. The aim of this campaign was to produce a discussion focused on the issue that discrimination and prejudice against women is still a common problem in both first and third world countries. Beginning with the creative brainstorming process, the agency copywriter typed phrases related to women into a Google search and discovered startling results. To make sure these results were not only valid for the Middle East, the Dubai-based agency reached out to other Ogilvy offices in different parts of the world and asked them to type the same phrases into Google and report back. The worldwide search results were remarkably similar. The idea for this campaign was simple: to incorporate the text created by Google's autocomplete function into the mouths of women in order to illustrate the silencing of women's voices in the world. 4 women were photographed for the campaign, each from a different region of the world, to show that the problem is universal and not limited to specific geographical areas. The goal of the print and web ads was to demonstrate the pervasiveness of the stereotypes toward women and that the road to true gender equality is still blocked by ignorance. The genius of this campaign resides in its simplicity. A Google search is an action that we all do several times a day. Once people saw the images, they immediately wanted to check the search results for themselves. The ease of creating similar images from Google searches and sharing them has been a key component of audience engagement in the campaign. The campaign made people rethink the situation of women today and brought the issue back to the global agenda. For UN Women, the searches confirm the urgent need to continue making the case for women's rights, empowerment, and equality, a cause the organization is pursuing around the world. A significant attitudinal shift was ushered in with the new millennium. We have witnessed a formidable increase of women's visibility, impressive role models in every aspect of life, so much so that one would think that women have gained true equality. The unfortunate fact, though, is that women are still not paid equally to that of their counterparts. Women are still not represented in equal numbers in business or politics. And globally, women's education, health, and the violence against them are worse than that of their male counterpart. However, significant improvements have given women real lifestyle choices. They can be astronauts, prime ministers, and vice presidents. They can attend university, and they can both work and have a family. In collecting these materials, my goal was to touch upon the most critical aspects of inequality, violence, and discrimination that many women face daily, starting with domestic violence and its acceptance as the norm in many cultures, gender inequality and its abuses, and gender and race discrimination and lack of equal pay and respect. Why do artists and designers feel compelled to create these type of images? I would answer that artists and designers possess the skills and knowledge to influence human behaviors. Anyone who works in the advertising industry can tell you that. Today, whether a poster is physical or digital doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters most, ultimately, is that the message reaches its intended audience. For the posters that form the core of the Women's Rights or Human Rights exhibition, the message is imperative for all human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your thoughtful words and analysis of so many of these important topics. And thank you again for participating with us on this event.
Serious stuff.
It is. It's very serious and deep and profound, which is so much what this show is about too. And I think so many people, when coming to the space here, to our venue on campus, are, walk away with so much to think about. So, and thank you so much for organizing this and taking this on. It's really wonderful. Now I think I will go ahead and present our first of three art participating artists. Alice Druding, we'd like to start with you. Is that okay? Angie, let's unmute you.
First thing I'd like to say is what a pleasure and an honor it is to have our work included in this exhibition and to be on this panel with women whose work I so admire. Everything, I say our work because everything I'm showing is done in collaboration with Joe Scorsoni, my design partner with whom I started working in the mid to late 80s. When we started working together, clients were primarily nonprofit arts and educational organizations. And we did the full range of work commonly done in small studios: identities, catalogs, brochures, invitations, signage. We particularly loved assignments that allowed us to create posters that advertised and promoted attendance at performances, exhibitions, and other kinds of events. In the mid-90s, it occurred to us that we could actually do more posters if we acted as our own clients, per se, using design to communicate about subjects that were important to us. We had questioned the legitimacy of design that didn't have a client, and that was sort of a big issue in those days. And that would be a topic for another panel, but we choose to still call it design, and we carried on doing our own self-authored work along with client work. Initially, we just did a series of posters that were not really meant to be instructive or persuasive, but were a way of sharing some of our personal observations about life. We did a fairly large series of this sort of work over the next 4 to 5 years, and they got a really good response. Around the end of the 90s, we became much more interested in using design to participate in broader sociopolitical conversations that were occurring in curated and invitational poster exhibitions and international competitions. Since then, our work has covered a large range of topics, including many aspects of war, public health, immigration, human trafficking, factory farming, and a variety of environmental issues. Basically, the purpose of this work is to introduce viewers to new information, or more often to present familiar topics in a new way. We want to make memorable images that will linger in the viewer's mind, and that will keep the issue as well in the viewer's mind. And eventually, you hope, somehow to evoke a response, that someone would be inspired to vote, or to vote a certain way, to change personal or spending habits, or work for or donate to a cause, talk to other people about the issue, have some kind of a response to what people are seeing. Women's issues have been an important part of this work through the years. On the left, the Quanto Project, which is in this exhibition. The Quanto Project was for creating awareness of sexual exploitation and slavery of women. It was the beginning of our research into sexual slavery and human trafficking, and we've done other work on that topic. And we were shocked, frankly, weren't really aware of the extent of human trafficking around the world, and it's an ongoing issue for women. Rape is a weapon of war, very commonly used in many countries. Girls are victims of enormous discrimination, so it starts at an early age and continues on through adulthood. Girls Belong in School was done in 2014, and it's particularly poignant to me that this poster could have been designed in response to what's going on in Afghanistan right now. Seems like when we take a few steps forward and then a few steps or many steps back. Progress for women is not a straightforward thing, and it's something we have to keep constant. We have to be constant in our pursuit. Child marriage is another form of child abuse that occurs in many countries, where young girls are forced to marry much older men. Again, another problem that continues throughout in many parts of the world. Acid violence is something that occurs primarily in India, Bangladesh, Cambodia, and is a form of suppressing women. And on the right, fistula is an example of how we wanted to educate people about something that wasn't commonly known. It's a gynecological injury. It's fairly common and relatively easily treated, which is done in developed countries. But in developing countries, the resources for that are very scarce. And the women who suffer from these sorts of injuries, which can be caused by a variety of things, these women really have absolutely no future and no hope for any kind of life in their community. Finally, this poster, which was done recently prior to this exhibition, thanks to Liz, who put our name forward for this. This was done as part of an AIGA campaign, a poster exhibition to commemorate 100 years of voting rights for women in the United States. Kind of shocking that it's only 100 years. And to obviously encourage people to vote in what turned out to be a very important election. For this work to be effective, it has to be seen. So we think that our posters are especially interesting and effective in the context of other work that addresses the same topic. An isolated poster can be very powerful, but I think in the context of others, its power is enhanced. And this particular exhibition is a wonderful example of that kind of conversation. And it can be seen in so many places. So you see it in galleries and museums, in catalogs and books, websites, online publications, blogs. And this particular exhibition, I was in Mexico in San Luis Potosí in its first iteration, where it was shown actually on the street. And this is a place where posters really traditionally have been seen. We don't see very much of that in the United States. The poster isn't quite as prevalent here as it is in other parts of the world. But when it's out in the streets and when people who don't normally go to galleries and museums or don't think to look things up like this up online, they encounter these things, and it generates a lot of conversation in places where I think it's very, very important. So I really particularly like these very public venues for this kind of work. On a final note, I'd just like to thank Liz for incredible work in putting together this powerful show and making sure that it would be seen around the world. And thanks, Michele, to you for bringing the show to this conversation to the community in Pomona. It's really a pleasure to be a part of it. Thank you. There's the posters we did when we were working together. There's the first series. These are examples of posters that we do on other topics. These are women's posters. Now I see why you were saying like typical Zoom.
I think what I'll do when we visit the exhibition, we'll go through those again so that people recognize the ones that are in the show.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So thank you so much, Alice, for that. Your words were very well spoken. So we got visuals, some visuals with what you were saying. So thank you. And I will go ahead when I go through the exhibition, I'll point out your work so that people can see it in context there as well. So now I would like to introduce Anita Kuntz.
First of all, I'm so thrilled to be part of this show. I want to make sure that I can post this on Facebook and make sure everybody sees this, because I think more people should see this. I mean, it's just, I've lived my whole career, obviously as a woman and experienced a lot of things, but just the enormity of what Elizabeth was talking about is truly profound. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a bunch of my early work. I mean, I've always been an illustrator. So the reason I wanted to be an illustrator is because my uncle was an illustrator and his motto was art for education. And it's from that I got the idea that art could actually serve a function in culture. And it didn't necessarily need to be purely decorative. So this is a lot of my early work. I did a lot of portraits and it was really great. It was really great to be able to actually make a living as an artist. There's all kinds of stuff. I did a lot of portraits. A lot of it is funny. In a lot of my work, I've used humor as a bit of a subversive tool. I did a whole lot of work for Rolling Stone. I did a lot of portraits for the great Fred Woodward, who was a great art director. But I've also done stuff that's a little bit more serious. And I've done more recently, I've done a lot of images about social and political subjects. But more recently, I've done work that's a little bit more gender-based. And just as an illustrator, I always felt a little bit like an other. Things did happen to me. Later, I started doing work that was really, when I was younger, I sort of just always wanted to make sure that I was treated like one of the guys. Of course, I never was. But later, I started to use imagery that was more gender specific, more specific to my gender. And I started doing pictures that were more serious to me. For example, this one is about depression. This is called Vestigial Virgin. I've done a lot of sort of personal work that has to do with the intersection of science and anthropology. I'm going to come up now to what I've been doing in the past couple of years, which is book work, which is completely personal book work. The work that you saw earlier was it was my commercial work. And it was, again, I was really thrilled to be able to do imagery that had, that I could make a living. I could make a living as an artist. And some of the work was great. Like this was for a book about motherhood and about how motherhood isn't always this glorious, amazing experience. It also talked about infanticide and motherhood in different cultures. And I started noticing that things were changing when this was supposed to be a Time cover. And when I finally got the magazine, they had published a picture of Leonardo DiCaprio instead, which was really disappointing. Anyway, here's some other magazine covers. I do like working for the New Yorker because I can get a little bit of a statement in there. This was actually my first one. And it was for the July 4th holiday. And I wanted to do something that sort of honored the Native people who were there before white people. Some of them, again, are funny. This was for an anniversary cover. Another cover, sometimes I can get away with doing more serious things. This is about what I believe to be the coming water shortage. And I think there will be a lot of bloodshed about that, unfortunately. More portraits. This was actually a couple years after the September 11th, and there was really not very much political commentary about the administration at that time. And this is one of the first things that they published, so I was really grateful for that. This was a cover about human cloning and whether it was possible. It was in the news at that time. Another Mother's Day cover. So here's one that got a lot of press. I wanted to do something that had to do with something that you could see in a New York subway, but also had to do with how women feel we need to present ourselves in different cultures. And the interesting thing is, the problem with doing commercial work is that you don't always get your way. So in this case, I wanted to call it Three Visions, and they ended up calling it Girls Will Be Girls, which I thought kind of trivialized it a little bit. Anyway, that's kind of the nature of being a commercial illustrator. This is called Silent Night, Endless Fight, about the endless tours of duty that the soldiers had to do in Afghanistan. This is called Dangerous Toys. Let Them Eat Cake. And this is one that I did last year. And, sadly, it's still relevant. So this was, I was just feeling terrible for all the students who had to graduate in this time of COVID. I have so many rejected New Yorker covers. This is something that I sent them about what's going on in Texas and about, the bounties on women who want to obtain abortions, but it wasn't published. About steroid abuse, and I've done a few time covers. I'm trying to make them really strong visuals. I did a couple things for Ms. Magazine. This is the only one I could find, but they were obviously really great to work for. I'm sorry that they went out of print. I only did one picture of him, and that was enough. Okay, so I want to show you some of the posters that I've done. I agree. I love posters. I love doing posters. I wish there were more availability to do this kind of work or more opportunity in the US, but there doesn't seem to be. These were posters that I did for the Women's March in Washington. Oh, this is something I've been going to Istanbul every year, every other year, and there's an organization there that does a cartoon competition. But there's money that they organize dormitories in the country so the girls can go to school, so that the parents send the girls to school so that the girls can, so that the girls get an education. Otherwise, they're not likely to get an education in the country. Here's another poster for the Women's March, and this is in the show. Again, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm so thrilled to be in this show. I want everyone to see it. I don't know how we've got to get more people to have this show. This was also something about female genital mutilation. And of course, I agree, you have to be very careful about how you do it. I use a lot of metaphor, and especially something this serious is always difficult to illustrate. This is for Mirko Illich's traveling show about tolerance. Okay, so that's kind of where I come from, but my projects that I've been working on now are a book that I just wrote and illustrated that came out a couple of months ago. It's called Another History of Art, and I like so many others, went to school, and the only thing we learned about is one certain kind of art, and it was art that was made by pretty much European white men. And so I wanted to do a satirical book about what if I had done the history of art. And it's a really cheeky concept, I know, but I started thinking, well, like who gets to decide what is great art? And art from only one perspective. There's so many other kinds of great art. So anyway. I took a lot of famous paintings and I sort of redid them. This one, I wanted to do something that was, so many of the paintings that we learned about in art school are religious paintings, and I wanted to do something about the religious subjugation of women. So the book, again, it's called Another History of Art, and it's like if I had done it. So I think you can see some of the references here. And again, also, I'm, very aware that a lot of art that we learned about has religious contexts. And again, I love doing pictures that are about anthropology and science and things like that. Okay, so later when I was near completion of the book, I started getting a little crazy. It started getting a little bit away from me, and I blame Trump. I blame that nothing made sense, and so I kind of went off in a completely different direction. But anyway, so the book's satire, that's okay. So, but this is the one that I've been working on now, and this is during the pandemic. This is my pandemic project, and this is something that I'm super excited about. And this book will be out next month. During the pandemic, I've done almost 300 portraits of extraordinary women. And let's see, I'll spend a couple minutes doing this. So I just, I try to do one portrait every day. And the thing that really amazed me was that there were so many women I had never heard of. And I grew up in Canada, like I had a pretty good education. Why had I never heard of any of these women? It was ridiculous. So I started doing research, and I'll just show you some of the examples here. So the National Geographic now thinks that a lot of the early cave paintings, they've analyzed the handprints, and they've come to the conclusion that they were female. So it's entirely possible that some of the first artists were women, which I find extraordinary. That the typical bias would be that anything important would have been done by a man. But I found all these extraordinary examples about women who have done things that men have taken credit for. For example, she made a urinal that Marcel Duchamp took credit for, and he's considered the father of modern art. Anyway, there's a lot more information in the book. I've got rebels. I've got incredible women like this who survived years in the Arctic when the people that she was taking care of all died. I've got incredible stories of transgender women. Tarana Burke, who started the Me Too movement years ago. I think everybody thinks that it was all the Hollywood actresses who started, but she started a long time ago, and she certainly deserves credit. I've got a lot of native, she's a Canadian outspoken water activist, right up there with Greta. This woman discovered that the universe is not actually comprised of the elements that was previously thought. So, she's an extraordinary scientist. I've never heard of her. She discovered the nature of global warming in the 1800s. These stories are extraordinary. Augusta Savage was an incredible sculptor. Saint Ebbe was in Scotland. She was a Mother Superior, and she instructed all her nuns to disfigure themselves so they wouldn't be raped, because the Viking marauders were coming. So they did, but they were killed anyway. And that's where the term "to cut off your nose to spite your face" comes from. Alicia Garza, who along with two others started the Black Lives Matter movement. Queen Charlotte, who seems to be, nobody knows about this one except my Black friends, but apparently she was not Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle was not the first Black royal. In fact, Queen Charlotte was. There's enough evidence to prove that she had the lineage where she would have been the first Black royal, something completely whitewashed. She was an incredible, I think I'm going over my time. I'm just going to go really quickly. Anyway, it's been just an incredible project, and I could keep going on. This incredible woman invented the cure for leprosy and was never acknowledged. Plenty of women who have suffered terrible atrocities, or women who have, she discovered the game Monopoly, was never made a penny of it because someone else said that they had done it. Freddie Overstegen was a beautiful young Dutch war resister, Nazi resister, who seduced Nazis and then killed them. But one of the first computer code writers. Okay, on and on. So anyway, that's the book. And I've got 300. I'm sure there are 300 more, and I'm going to stop. Oh, she's good. Wait, let me just tell you about her. So she is a wrestler, and she didn't want to get married. And so she said, okay, anybody who wants to win my heart will have to wrestle me. And if you lose, you have to give me 10 horses. She ended up not married, but with like herds and herds and herds of horses. So extraordinary stories of extraordinary women. Anyway, so that's my project. And that's, I think that's it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I went over.
No, thank you, Anita. It was very compelling, so please don't apologize. I want to throw out a question. I know it's not the Q&A time right now yet, but what size are you working in all of those portraits? I imagine there might be some various sizes, but when it comes to these women's pieces, so like a 9x12 or something?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful.
I did them so that I could do one a day.
Okay, great. And a comment I'm just noticing on the chat, a comment from Anthony Aycock. Thank you for showing the work that wasn't published. I think it's awesome for students to see that great ideas aren't always accepted, but are still clearly portfolio worthy.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about when I teach is I show a lot of rejections, and there's a lot of rejection in the art world. And I think it's important to do your own projects, and especially something that you feel really important, really, really strongly about. And I think this poster show is a great idea of that. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, and that goes for Alice as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for Alice, I think you should. Can you sort of do it again after this, because I think it's important to see all of her work in context, because incredibly strong work.
Yeah, I think we could take a moment, Alice, and kind of re-show those after we have Parissa. Does that sound good to everyone? So Parissa, Tasha Corey, I would like for you to present your work to the group.
Hello from Colorado, and you may know that I am originally from Iran, but now living in the US. First of all, thanks for having me among all these incredible women and the university students and curator Michele. Thanks for arranging this, and just know that I'm so honored about that. Okay, I started my career from 2000 while I was still a student, and I had to work to pay my tuition. And I wore lots of hats during my career, working for two well-known advertising agencies in Iran. And later I opened my studio based on some advice from my previous boss, and had a chance to focus more on art, social, and environmental issues. Since the focus is on women's rights, let's talk a little about the situation of women in Iran. From my point of view, Iranian women's history is divided into 3 segments. Some people said 4 segments because they consider Pahlavi also. But pre-Islam, the Islamic era, and the modern Islamic state that was after the revolution in 1979. In each era, we can see the system of patriarchy in the society, as well as the powerful women who tried to break these boundaries and fight for an equal society. You can see the many facets of Iranian women just by a simple Google search, and you will see conservative women as well as young girls protesting for their everyday rights. And women that have left Iran continue to fight for Iranian women or finding their own freedom. You will start to see how Iranian women may live in the same country, but are varied in many aspects, from outfit to habits to even their values in women's rights. Aside from all propaganda and all stereotypes about Iran, I would say that Iranian women are very brave and strong and play a critical role in the society. And as you see in the picture, we had Maryam Mirzakhani, Iranian mathematicians, and Ansari in astronomy, and Shirin Nashad in art, Golshifteh Farahani, well-known actress, and some activists like Nasrin Sotoudeh and more people in the human rights area. Growing up as a girl in a country full of controversy, there were always so many questions running through my mind. During my life, I observed the cruelty and discrimination against women all around me. There were different levels of aggression, from physical to verbal abuse. My own mother was viewed as stubborn simply because she didn't want to accept views about how women should behave and act. Seeing this dynamic in my childhood, I always thought, why do the girls in my family not have the same right as boys have? This later transformed into the questions, why do the women in my country not have the same rights as the men? And why have women not been able to fight for their freedom? Why do many Iranian women not even know about the freedom and how freedom could look like? And why should we tolerate our laws? And are we really satisfied with living as second-class citizen or even worse? All these kind of questions could not easily or safely be answered in my society, which is ultimately why, in order to pursue my agency, I'm here today with my beautiful family and able to present to you all. It was through my exposure to higher education and seeing the power of design as my voice in society that I realized that my journey needed to continue beyond the barriers that were put upon me in Iran. Many women are still living in Iran in hard, unfair conditions or oppressive situations. The women who are artists also have to work with these rigid limitations, and despite their effort, the mainstream population rarely has exposure to their work. Through the agency that I found in the US, I am now able to display to the world what real Iran looks like with all the complexity, and then continue to spread hope to those who still wish for an equal Iran. This poster is dedicated to the generation I came from, who witnessed the most violent behavior by the conservative community. Believe it or not, there were some people in our university who were responsible for censoring art books in the library. And that really made us feel uncomfortable. And my connection with social poster goes back to my thesis in 1996. And I researched about grassroots activities by local people who try to reduce the environmental pollution through simple ways in their area. And for the design part, I designed 20 posters on environmental issues. And later I developed those posters and updated in more professional look. And these are two examples of those posters. And this poster was another one of those collection which brought me design award and credits and made me change from a young designer to a professional designer. It also had a great impact on Iranian graphic artists to draw their attention to depicting social problems. And this is how a design piece could change my life and connected me to the international design community. Here are two other posters that I designed considering all the restrictions that existed in Iran to talk about sensitive issues such as AIDS. And I brought up the importance of educating people before any sexual relationship and also decision to have children. Back to the main point, the new generation of Iranian women are fierce and reckless and react to all inequalities and social discrimination. They strongly believe that women's rights are human rights. In 2017, just a few months before my immigration to the US, I received an invitation from Elizabeth to design a poster about women's rights. I invite very, in the first moment, very quickly. And during the design process, I remembered that my mind blossomed with many ideas that came from my bitter experience in a family with a conservative background. But instead of showing the negative face of women's rights in Iran, I decided to focus on women's empowerment through the style that I had with embroidery and things like that. I also decided to execute another idea among my sketches, and many people ask me what this poster means. This type of fabric is mostly used as a hijab for traditional religious women in Iran for praying or in their casual family gathering. The conflict is exactly the same point that Liz mentioned about the condition of women in Saudi Arabia, because in religious conservative families in Iran, women are under male guardian in different periods of their lives. They are under supervision of their father, then brother, and husband, and even when their husband passed away, they go under their son's guardian or even son-in-law. And with the modern use of embroidery on this type of fabric, I wanted to remind that women's rights don't belong just to modern or educated women, and all levels of women should know their rights. And Birdie magazine, Colorado's only art magazine, published this poster for New Year 2019 with an article from editor on women's rights. And some other posters, the social posters about the conflict in Middle East and against suppression of protesters of the whole world. And we all are familiar with this matter, that how our hope sometimes would have been ruined during the election. As you all are aware better than me, most of visual design students are girls. But in the real world of industry, we still do not see equal amount of people, number of people, different genders. As an educator and designer, I always try to give message to students along with design lessons. They must believe in their power and never give in to obstacle, because not all successful women were exceptional or Martian. They were exactly like us, but with confidence and perseverance in their profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Parissa, for that. It's really wonderful to see your experience coming from your country and the motivation that drove you. Thank you for sharing that. Alice, would you like to show your work and give it a little bit of context so that we can see those slides?
Sure. Anyway, just to recap, this is my studio. I work with Joe Scorsoni. We have a collaboration. All the posters is a very fluid process. All the posters are done by the two of us. And these are just some examples of early work that we did for clients. We had a lot of theater and dance companies and museums and galleries that we worked for. And these are just some examples of the earlier posters I talked about that were just really about personal subjects. A lot of them are about being recovering Catholics, but also other sorts of observations about life and the world. And these are just a sampling of posters that we've done over the years. Ethnic Cleanser was the first socio-political poster that we did. And we've continued to do them since then. So that was in the late 90s. So we've been at it for a while doing this kind of work. And on the left, the Quanto project is in the show. The poster on the right is another women's issue, Rape is a Weapon of War. This is the Girls Belong in School poster that I was talking about that we did in 2014. And it seemed like things were getting better for girls in a country like Afghanistan, and then obviously that's not happening now. And there's about child marriage, which is another very prevalent practice in many countries. Acid violence, this is in the show, and fistula is in the show. And fistula is a really uncomfortable poster to do because it makes the people who suffer are so vulnerable. And I felt like that discomfort actually would convey to the viewer and create some sense of empathy, hopefully, in that. But it's also, it's not a very commonly known problem, even though it's so pervasive. And then voting poster that we did with AIGA. And then just, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be part of a conversation through the posters, through events like this, through the different ways this work gets disseminated. I think it's all important and part of the way artists can, have an effect and participate. We use our skills, the skills that we are trained to use on the behalf of clients and that actually earn us a living can also be used for this sort of thing. And as a former educator, it was something that I always felt was really important for my students and for myself to do. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show you.
Thank you, Alice. I think that helped put that into context as well. Thank you very much. So now we could go into the Q&A portion of, I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat, but if any of you do have questions, please, now is a good time to go ahead and do that. Makaria will be reviewing those and seeing and bringing them up as they do. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to go ahead? I have a curatorial question for you, Elizabeth.
Okay.
So in organizing this exhibition, I imagine you must know a lot of designers and perhaps many around the world. How did you go about did you invite people to participate in this and submit work? Or was this something that you put out a prospectus of some sort for artists to participate in? How did you go about that?
That's a great question. Thank you. I've done several other socio-political poster exhibitions with other people, but the women's rights kind of came up not as a really big planned exhibition. It just kind of happened by the suggestion of a friend of mine who thought I should put some of the posters from the previous exhibition, Graphic Advocacy, in the mayor's office in Boston during International Women's Day. And I kind of dismissed that idea because that's not a curatorial. So I said to her, okay, I can do a small women's rights exhibition by just going and looking at the work that's easily accessible on the internet. Many posters done by people I've worked with previously. And that's how it started. And interestingly enough, for the most part, it was work that I found, and I was very specific about collecting very specific pieces. Patricia was actually physically invited because I know she's an excellent designer, and I really wanted her voice. She had not produced a piece that I saw on this topic at that time, and I did invite her, but most of the work was hand chosen by myself from people who, like Alice and Joe. They're an excellent example. I'm very familiar with Alice and Joe's work. Alice at that time was working on a women's series during, I believe, her sabbatical. Yes, and she produced many more than I could put in the show, but I took 4 of them, but they existed already. And so most of the work that I put in my exhibitions exist. Because the thing about invitationals, you have to be very careful, because in an invitational, there's an expectation that if you invite somebody to make a piece of work, that you have to put it in the show. And we're all human, and we all make good work and not so good work. I'm certainly an example of that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work so well. But in an invitational, you have to put that work in. And I prefer not to put myself in that position because people get very angry with you. Trust me, I know that. So it's chosen by me.
Understood. Okay, so curated, you made all of those curatorial choices. So I could imagine as a curator myself, like it would be hard to stop if you see some really good work by the same artist, like as you said, there's some of these artists are working in these with these topics and these themes. Right. And I imagine it must be difficult sometimes to make those cut off those choices or know when to stop, as I also do as a curator too. So
well, this is an interesting this is a very different exhibition than I've done before, because prior to this, I did do 3 other socio-political exhibitions, and they were printed. They were framed, there was a catalog, they were set. So there was no additions once it was completed. With the Women's Rights Show, I started out with 62. And because the show, as you well know, it doesn't travel physically, but is downloaded and then printed, I was able to add more work as I saw it come about. And although there are 108 posters right now, and I'm pretty set at the moment, but if I saw a poster that I thought I really wanted to have, I would ask the person to put it in. So it can expand.
Right. Okay. Just briefly, I just want to say thank you to Parissa, because she has to go soon, has to go teach a class, I guess. So thank you so much for participating today. Thank you, Parissa, for being here. And I'm very sorry that you have to go, but thank you.
No problem.
So
thank you very much for all of
Thank you, Parissa.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Could I follow up with a question for Liz
Sure.
about something that came up while she was putting the show together? There was some question about whether to include men designing this work. And Liz, I know that she gave a lot of thought to that, because there were some voices saying it should only be women.
Okay, well, I think Alice knows the story. Initially, the idea came about, I had mentioned it to two other women that are in the poster community who I have great respect for and I like a lot, and they're from two different cultures. And I thought the three of us could do this exhibition together. But I kind of hit a roadblock with the two other women because they thought this exhibition should be women designers only. And I thought that there was a hypocrisy to that that wasn't. I had seen so many really effective posters dealing with inequality, dealing with the violence against women, dealing with the discrimination against women. And it didn't make any sense to me to exclude creative men from this process. And so long story short, they thought they would go and do their own show, which didn't really happen. And I completely took the reins of this. It was my idea to begin with. I floated it, and I think it's really important in an exhibition like this, in anything that we do, that we don't eliminate men from it. We need the men are our partners, and if they believe in the same things we believe in, why would we want to cut them out? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I have to say that when I originally was looking at the list of artists' names, I was like, oh, there's men in this show. And part of me, I don't know why I thought there wouldn't be, but I do it. And I looked specifically at the men's work just to see, because we tend to think, well, we're women, so we know better about what it is to be a woman and what the women's issues might be. But when you see that the men are just as engaged and just as interested, and I happen to have a husband who's quite the feminist, thank goodness, and why shouldn't men have a voice or be heard too? Because like you say, if women are going to reach the point of equality at any point in the future, we hope, we're going to need the support of others, and men are the others in this situation. So we need that, so.
Yeah, and they were, the ones that I did manage to collect. And again, it wasn't an invitational. I saw the work and I saw how poignant it was, and I reached out and I asked for it. And so, that's, the men are, of course, there are partners, there are sons. Yeah, so that's basically how that came about.
Okay, so thank you. And Mac, do you see any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we have one from Melissa Lang for Anita. Can you talk about your process for researching your subjects, visual and informational research? And what preparation do you do to get a piece started?
Well, okay. First, I'll tell you why I did the book, because I think that there's so many women who have been marginalized and who are unknown. I mean, I was shocked when I started doing the research, and this is like a passion project for me. But I would love for this to be a whole genre. I want to see tons of books like this. Anyway, but when I started researching, it was sadly easy. Like, it's so easy to find. I started out by asking people in different fields. Like, I asked somebody who's in science, who do you know any women who have been remarkable that most people haven't heard of? And so I kind of started there. But all you have to do is look at, there are enough blogs out there. The New York Times is now doing something, obituaries for people who have been forgotten. There's certainly a lot of women there. And, sadly, once you start looking there, there's just so many of them. And like I said, I've done 300. I could do way more. I just think I felt really compelled this is something that really needs to be done. The preparations to do, I've been illustrating for a really long time, and I'm pretty fast. I do a quick sketch and then I just start. The reason I wanted to do something so quickly is I want it to be a big project. And I think it's, I think it's important. I think it's important to celebrate women, especially ones who've been marginalized and forgotten. So I don't know, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I hope that answered your question. I just started.
I think what's interesting about what you're doing is, there are groups of the unknown women who I've, seen books about, and I think they're all great, but you really get into areas that are completely unknown to me. I've never seen anybody talk about it. And, your project to me represents the depth. As you say, you did 300, you could have done probably 3,000, like the deliberate suppression of this information over generations, hundreds of years, is just astonishing. And I don't think we've been fully aware that this was going on until now. I'm almost 70 and I'm like shocked.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, plus I think it was really, really important to me to have as wide a diversity as possible. I've got young women, old women, women from all cultures. I'm still asking, I ask people, do you have any suggestions? Send them to me. I thought that was really important. The other thing that's really important is, like, for me, this is a book of stories. They're incredible stories. The narratives are astonishing. And I didn't want to do just nice women. Like, I've got rebels, I've got a bank robber, I've got a pirate. I mean, these are great. This isn't just, I wanted the full experience. Like, we're fully human being. I didn't want this sort of tyranny of niceness, having grown up in a family where I always had to be nice and nice and nice. No, anyway.
Well, I think it is definitely an amazing contribution to the art world, to the design world and to the world period, because it is important to have these conversations. And I think there is more and more of these revelations being made of women in history. There has been, a movement towards that. I know in art history, there's been a lot of push towards making sure that women and people of color are getting recognized historically. And so I think it's a wonderful project that you're working on. And I'm excited to see you continue it, and it should be a really wonderful thing. Do you plan on publishing? This is a book that you plan on publishing on a limited basis, or are you thinking about more of a mass production publication?
It's been picked up by Pantheon, so it'll be out November 11th, I think.
Oh, wow, it's very soon. And how many women's stories do you have in the book?
In the first, I don't want to make this about the book. I'm sorry, you guys, because it's really about the poster show. But so the book has 150, and I've got another 150. So hopefully there'll be a second book. I'd love for this to continue, and I'd love for other, like this initiative that Elizabeth did. I mean, it's an incredible initiative. Like, I'm really excited about this poster show. Like, I wanted to be all over the place. I wanted to be all over the world. I mean, I love these kind of initiatives. So,
well, I can say that when I was organizing this with Elizabeth during COVID, CSU San Diego was interested in pursuing this show as well. And I know that we're kind of logistically, we're kind of close to one another, being both part of the CSU. I mean, we're about 2.5 hours away from one another driving, but they were very interested too. And I told them, oh, but I'm doing it. And so I think they backed off on it. But, I'm not opposed to, obviously with Elizabeth's stamp of approval, and of course, whatever we need to do, I'm sure this maybe could be something that other CSUs might be interested in picking up. I've been working a lot with the CSU system of galleries, directors, and museum directors throughout the CSU. We've been meeting throughout the entire pandemic to really help support our programming, and been working together on some lectures and event programming as well. And it's something that I'll pitch to them if there's interest to do that. And we could share it throughout the CSU. And, of course, we've already printed these. So maybe there is something that we can do and offer, these and maybe share them and make it a more like a traveling exhibition throughout the CSU. So this is just a thought I'm throwing out there, and we could talk about details if you'd like. But I think that could be something. Obviously, it'd be even better if it was even, like at MoCA or MOLA, or not MoCA, not MOLA, but
yes.
MoCA or LACMA, that that would be nice too. And, who knows? The more exposure you get, the more possibilities there are, the more people will talk about it. So
Has this show been seen at any venue in Texas?
It will be. It will be.
Because I feel
I'm
like
getting
it, I know people in El Paso who would probably be interested, but I feel like it should be at every university in Texas right now.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm working on it.
So
Slow going, but I'm working on it.
very, yes. And I'm sure there's a couple of other places that should be targeted as well.
Yes.
But thank you for that. And are there any other questions before we move on? I think I do have the virtual exhibition up. I have it. I was finally able to get it to work. It seems that I have to shut Chrome down and restart it to make it work. Would you all like to see the virtual exhibition? We'll take you on a quick tour.
Sure.
Okay, Emily, be on standby in case anything happens, because as you can see, I think we're having all kinds of little technical glitches today. So if anything happens, I'll have Emily take over. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. I think I'm already starting to see a glitchiness happening. Can you all see the gallery? This is the Kellogg Art Gallery in a completely different location. This is just an invented place, is not real, but it does look very much like our gallery. And we are approaching through the courtyard here. And we'll walk through the doors, which we know we can't do in real world and the real life, but you can see this is very close to very much what the Kellogg Art Gallery looks like on our campus. I'll just give you a quick turnaround. Like, this is what we call the West Gallery, because it's on the west side. And you can see Anita's work right here. I'm pointing at that. I hope you can all see my arrow. And let me see here. And hold on, I'm just trying to make my screen a little bit bigger. And this section here, the way I designed the space was there's a lot, obviously the show has a title which gives you a heads up on what is contained in it. I'm just going to read the full title of the show again. Women's Rights are Human Rights, International Posters on Gender-Based Inequality, Violence, and Discrimination. So, my first thoughts were, when we were organizing this with Emily, the first thought was, okay, should we try to see if we can see what pieces are about inequality? Should we see what pieces are about violence and what pieces are about discrimination? And of course, I think that was, the wrong way to get started because a lot of these overlap in all of those different commentaries. Some things are about inequality and violence at the same time, or inequality and discrimination at the same time. But there were some things we were able to kind of join together, different works that made sense to put together. And what I found as I was going through all of now you say that there's 108 posters, but we counted 112 in what we did. Now I'm wondering if any of those you're counting a series as though it was one word.
Yeah, the was it Singapore bus series?
Got it. Yes.
That they were, I guess initially they were counted as 3, but they're small. They can't blow up very large. So I put them in one poster.
Yeah.
So that's probably what would have happened.
Yeah. And now we were able to enlarge all 3 and show them separately. So just so that that's what we did. So we ended up counting 112 in this show. But what this West Gallery section, what we found were the more like inspirational works. You can see it here. I'm going to turn around one more time. Obviously, important women that have done important things and that are inspirational worthy, I would say, were kind of one of the first things I wanted people to see. So like the very positive points of view first. And of course, I mean, there's still, equal work for equal pay there, and with the Euro boobies, as we like to call them here. But there is definitely more of a positive, or I'd say maybe even inspirational point of view with the posters in this part of the space. And then also, I believe I just accidentally passed Paris's work, which was this one, the women's rights poster. And then Paris's also is here with which she showed in her presentation. But you can see like a lot more and of course we have Gretchen Thunberg there also as an inspirational, future woman, I would say, a girl's voice in the whole scheme of things as well. But a lot of these were
one of the ones that came in, one of the last ones I added. I had been looking for something and I saw that, and I was just so glad to be able to. That's Brooke Fisher. I was so glad to get that poster. She's important.
Yes, and it is a really, I mean, at first I thought it was photographic, like I thought it was photo manipulation, but it's actually
Painting.
It's actually a painted illustration, right? Yeah, it is. So let me see, sorry, there we go. You can see it, yeah, the details in her face are pretty clearly, and it gets a little fuzzy there. I'm sure on Zoom it's probably fuzzy as well. So then, this was sort of, as you go into this right section of the space, it's a little bit more of a positive experience. Well, what I'll invite you all to do is go to our website. It's the Kellogg Art Gallery at Cal Poly Pomona, and then go to current exhibitions and look for the women's rights or human rights under current exhibitions. And if you go to the virtual exhibition, then there's a clickable link there as well. But it does sound like Emily did share that link. So please feel free to do a tour of your own. And I apologize that we're having issues. And I think it's just the combination of combining Zoom with this particular virtual exhibition. So hopefully you all can enjoy that. So are there any other questions before we end today? I, again, apologize for that, but I hope that you all got a lot out of listening to the artists and the curator, who we really appreciate.
I want to say thank you so much, Michele, for all the hard work that you put in and all the dedication to making this show for your university. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate this event as well. And thank you to Alice, Anita, and Patricia for also agreeing to come on, and just so that you could, I think it's important that that you see these posters, but these posters are actually the passions of individuals and caring human beings. And these are 3 of the caring human beings that make a show like this possible. And so I'm really happy that we.
And also, I'd like to let people know too that the catalog that you've put together, I know it doesn't have all of the pieces in there, but it really is.
The PDF.
Oh, it does. Oh, there is one that does. Okay, one of the, because I've seen 2. Okay, so I'm sorry. So it is a really wonderful catalog to peruse, and you can really look up close at all the pieces. Really, it's very beautifully done, and that's also available on our website. So if you go to the website, you'll be able to see that there's the exhibition catalog is downloadable there, and it's really, really a wonderful, wonderful book. So thank you for.
It's in PDF only. It's not been printed yet.
Oh, okay. So it's
no. It's once I have enough funds, I will be able to do a print version, because I think that's important. But right now we do have the PDF.
Yes, and it is quite lovely. So thank you so much. Thank you all very much for your time today, and thank you all of those visitors that and registrants that came on today. Thank you for taking the time to. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. I think it was a really wonderful presentation from all of the artists and from our guest curator, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And if any of you are local, please come to the Kellogg Art Gallery at Cal Poly Pomona, and you can go to our website for our hours, and please come and visit us. Thank you so much, all of you, for attending today. I really appreciate it. Please enjoy your day. It's a wonderful sunny day. Everyone stay safe. It was really a pleasure to see you all here today. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.